Hey everybody. I recently got some motivation to make a video again, so I decided that I would impose upon you all of the knowledge that I have about moving item entities from point A to point B. I know it sounds like a somewhat boring concept, but I assure you by the end of the video we will have moved items with lava, brewing stands, stairs, mud, and more. There's a lot to talk about here, so I'll leave some timestamps in the description to help you navigate around if you need anything specific. Without further ado, let's get on with the tech. Since the dawn of items, we've had at least one thing that we could use to move items. Hey, even before hoppers, we had water. Now, flowing water can simply move items across itself. You might notice a problem in that when it reaches the end of the stream, 8 blocks, you're kind of out of luck. Well, thankfully you're not actually out of luck, and we have a block that removes friction. So if I fill that space up with ice, you can see the item continues to move across that space and moves into the next stream of 8. And you can repeat that infinitely off into the distance if you want. Might also notice that this is pretty slow. So if you want to speed things up, you can replace the entire water stream with ice. You see that speeds things up markedly. And I might be questioning about the 3 types of ice. Blue ice, regular ice, and packed ice. The difference isn't so large on them, but you can see that after a pretty long distance, the difference between blue ice and the other 2 types is about a half second or so. And that's because they have different friction values. You can see packed ice and regular ice. When I dispense these items, they slide the exact same distance, and blue ice goes about a quarter of a block further. This isn't really all that useful. It doesn't help that much in water streams because the items aren't affected by friction outside the last 3 blocks of the water stream and the space in between. So technically, if you want nearly maximum speed on a water stream, you can simply replace only the middle block in between and use packed ice for the rest. I strongly recommend against using regular ice in a water stream. It has a tendency to melt and make a mess of things. But you can see that that works just fine with nearly no slowdown between the water streams. There's another way to move items across ice. You don't see it nearly as often, and that's because it's expensive and annoying to work with, and on Bedrock Edition happens to be very laggy with pistons. But it sends items pretty fast and pretty far. Unfortunately too fast. I'll show that off in the bugs section. You don't actually need ice in your water streams. The solution there is to just shorten the length of your water sections to 3 blocks so that the item gets just enough momentum and height from floating up and the higher velocity at the start of the stream to jump over that gap. It's a bit nail-biting, but it's consistent, and I've used it a good number of times. Once you get into more advanced redstone, especially storage tech, you might notice that these ice and water streams can be a little bit limiting, especially in the fact that you can't place a hopper underneath the ice and expect it to still pick up the item. You could use this water stream that I just showed off, except with hoppers underneath, but that can be finicky to work with and doesn't always go as fast as you want. So what we do is we essentially place the item over 2 blocks. See here, this hopper is just barely able to see this item here above it, but it's also over the ice, so that if it were moving, it would slide. You can see that if I break this redstone block, nether stars will still go inside the hopper. Now, we do that by aligning it up against a block. It's a specific width. There's a few blocks that can do that, chests and pots and honey blocks. Uh, we mostly use honey blocks because they're not tile entities. They don't hurt your frame rate if you have too many of them, and they're not all that expensive, easy to produce in mass. If you're familiar with Java, you might be tempted to use something like a grindstone or an anvil to align items, but in Bedrock Edition that doesn't work. They'll gaslight you into thinking they do until you rotate it, and then it stops working. Now I've set up a little test here where you can see I have some hoppers in a line, and I can summon the items and they get aligned up against this honey block, and it moved across these hoppers and picked up by them. They've just been distributed across it. Now you might want to approach from a different angle with your water stream, and we have blocks to do that as well. That would be eggs, medium through fully grown amethyst buds, and just recently added the copper golem. Again, if you're from Java, you might be tempted to use sea pickles, but on Bedrock Edition, they don't have a hitbox. I have the same test setup, just with the hoppers on the other side and a copper golem for aligning. You can see just the same, they move across these hoppers. Now, something I found very interesting when working with storage tech is that alignment doesn't have to only be horizontal. You can also align vertically. For example, here, I have these items on top of an ice and in water on top of a mud block and over a hopper. See, if I break this redstone block, the items are going to go into this hopper. And that's possible with anything that's shorter than a block. Including soul sand and slabs and such. Soul sand and mud are especially useful because you can place components and redstone dust on top of them, including them being solid. Most of the time people use honey blocks instead of mud, but I've been trying to get people to use mud. It's cheaper and easier to place and easier to work with. Now, it's a little bit more annoying to set up than a item stream, say with a copper golem or a honey block, but it's not that bad. You can see if I just throw an item here, it aligns against the honey and then lands on top of the mud and moves across just like it would a regular water stream. It's not any slower or it's not any faster, it's just more useful. And you can see it just ignores things like repeaters in the stream, where if I didn't have this mud here, then the items would get caught on the repeater for a moment before moving along. For vertical item movement with water, the choice is pretty clear here in bubble columns. There's not much variance in how you can do these, except for on the top, where the most consistent method that I've found to push the items off the water stream is with a waterlogged stair right at the top. Throw an item here. It just hops right off. And if you want to extend this water stream, then all you have to do is place a block there, break it, and then replace that water source, and it's as long as you need it. So far, everything that we've covered has required water to move the items, but there's a good number of situations in which you aren't able to use water, most notably the nether. Thankfully, we have some solutions for that. Here, lots of people know about stairs and their ability to give items momentum if they show up in that little quadrant that's cut out of them, but lots of people forget about its much more violent older brother, the brewing stand. Now, brewing stands can be controlled in the direction that they bounce items by aligning them well and using slabs. You can see it's bouncing back and forth here, but if I place a slab, it'll slide right on past and fall off. You can probably see where I'm going with this. I drop an item here, and see it moves along this ice as if it were magic. Never thought I'd be moving items with brewing stands. If you want to replace the packed ice with blue ice, you can space it out a little bit more if you don't mind the expense. You can also make turns, although it's a bit of a pain. It's perfectly fine to make a turn in the direction that the item is, so you can see how it's on the slab. It's fine to make a left turn here, but I want to make a right turn. It doesn't quite work. This makes brewing stands as an item movement method really only viable for situations in which you want to consolidate a lot of items into a single area, usually a corner. I've seen it best used in fortress farms and such. Now, I showed off stairs earlier. It is possible to make item streams with stairs. They're incredibly slow, and I haven't quite found a use for them yet, but I figure I should show it off here just because it's pretty interesting to look at, I think. Doesn't really do anything to replace the packed ice with blue ice there, besides maybe make it a little bit faster. At the start of the video, I promised that we'd be moving items with lava before the end, and here we have it, lava. If I throw an item, you can see that it starts moving along. Now, as much as I wish that I could do black magic, this is not quite it. In fact, there is a wall here beneath this lava that catches the item before it hits it. It extends a half block above the ice, if you don't know. It works just the same if I use any other full block and throw it. Now, as with every other waterless item transmission method, this comes with its caveats. It only works in two directions, the ones facing the negative axis of the one that it's perpendicular with. For example, here, this lava is on the negative z-axis. The positive z-axis does not work. That was on the positive x-axis, or the negative x-axis, sorry, and the positive x-axis does not work. If you're insane, you can use water for this as well. I haven't found a use for this that couldn't be replaced by something better, but it does work. Something very nice about this lava trick is that the laws of vertical alignment work with it as well. So I'd love to see someone make a sushi bar with this mechanic, where the fish lands here on the bar and moves slowly across, seemingly impossibly. Before I go over some bugs that affect item transportation, I'd like to show off some water tech that I use quite frequently when designing storage tech. Some of them I feel like are quite underrated, and I don't see them used often enough in designs. The first bit of tech I have for you comes in being able to redirect water to places where you wouldn't usually be able to otherwise. For example, if you have two sources at a diagonal, they usually make a source. This is pretty common knowledge as an infinite water source. But there are two blocks that I know of, there might be more, but two that I know, that can prevent water sources from spawning above them, and that are ladders and scaffolding. These are both source blocks, and there is no source being created, and you get a diagonal flow. I use this quite frequently. You can also use flow length to manipulate where flow faces. For example, if you're short on room but need to make a turn, you can use this setup here where you have a stair and a source that flows one block before reaching the block the stair flows into, and it just makes a sharp right-hand turn. This is possible technically with any length of stream, where the shorter one is always one block shorter than the long one. There's also redirection that can happen vertically. I think this one is quite funny, not particularly useful, where here, once more, with scaffolding or ladders, if you put two sources at a diagonal, the top one will flow. Now, at first, this is only a visual flow. It's diamond blocks there. But if I allow it to flow to the right, It in fact pulls the item to the left, where it is visually flowing. I haven't used this for anything. I just think it's funny. There are also a set of items that allow them to be waterlogged, but not with sources, instead with flowing water, and that's levers, tripwire hooks, drip leaf, small drip leaf, and rods, comparators, and repeaters. I might be missing one or two there, but these are the ones that could be considered remotely useful. In them, besides the comparator and repeater for wiring reasons, there's two very interesting specimens in that int rods allow repeaters to be placed on top of them, and big drip leaf, which are technically conductive. I'm now going to talk about some bugs. This being Bedrock Edition, there's a good number to go over, but most of them aren't too annoying to work around if you go into it knowing that they exist. They're pretty annoying if you don't know that they exist when going into a project, as I have multiple times. So hopefully this section will stave off some problems before people have them. The first bug I'll go over I mentioned at the very start of the video with pistons and slime blocks. Now this is true of any very fast moving items such as with breeze charges. I can show it off most easily with pistons and slime blocks though. I've got this funny alignment set up here with the slime block piston pushing into a bunch of hoppers. If I activate that piston, you'll see the items go into every hopper except for two. Now this first hopper here is because the items are moving so fast that they skip over this hopper before checking. And the same thing is true here. Since hoppers don't check whether an item has passed over them, they check whether an item is currently over them. If an item is moving so fast that it crosses that entire block above it in less than a game tick, then the hopper simply will not pick up that item. Here's another rather frustrating bug that people pretty frequently run into when working with hoppers. You can see here I have two nearly identical setups, just in slightly different spots. If I throw a diamond block here, it's going to go in just fine. But if I throw it over here, you'll see the hopper doesn't pick the item up at all. To explain how this happens, I have to turn on chunk borders here, and you'll see that this hopper is across a chunk border from the item. This is not being picked up due to a bug in items where if their center is in a different chunk than the hopper they're over, even if it's fully over it in a place where it would have been picked up otherwise, the hopper won't pick up the item. This is accentuated by speeds where even if the water stream is not parallel to a chunk border across it, if the items are moving too fast over a chunk border, the hopper can skip the item, similar to how it happened over there, except it's a lot easier because the item can just be halfway into this chunk before the hopper skips. This is a pretty inconsistent bug, one that I can't recreate on video, but I've had it happen to me multiple times, and the fix is generally just to slow the item down at that chunk border specifically. Some people use magma blocks, or another option would be to put a repeater right here in the stream, right after the chunk border. To see the final bug on my list, we've got to go pretty far out in the world. Before telling you what the bug is, I'm just going to throw some items at these hoppers, which are blocked off by a tinted glass. Note that the block here doesn't matter that's above the hopper, you're just supposed to see that there's a hopper. Now, you may be rather interested to have seen that some of those items went into those hoppers. Now here, none of the items went into this hopper. You can see if I open up the glass. 2 went into here, all 4 went into here, and 2 went into here. Now, this has to do with the location that I'm standing. If at any point you go past 2048 blocks, and that's in positive or negative, then Hopper's pickup range expands. You can see that when I go past 2048 blocks in the z-axis, the hopper can pick up at an extra distance on the z-axis. Same goes for the x-axis. When I pass 2048 blocks, it can't pick up on the negatives, or the z-axis, but it can pick up on the x-axis. And when I go past that in both axes, it's able to pick up from all 4 directions. This is one that I personally experienced myself multiple times, not having any clue what was going on. And unfortunately, it causes many problems in storage tech. This is one of the ones I'd like to see fixed the most. I'll leave some bug reports for all of the bugs that I've shown off in the description. If you don't mind taking some time to give them an upvote, I'd appreciate that. And I'm sure you'd appreciate that too if you're working with this tech. And with that, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and especially making it to the end. I'll leave the bug reports for the bugs that I showed off today in the description, as well as an invite to the Prism Discord server, which has the world download for my test world that I used in this video. See ya.